All right, how you doing? I'm back, everybody, with Project 4th Gen Camaro. Today we're going to be doing an oil pan gasket. Okay, there's no better time to do the oil pan gasket on this car than having the trans out and the flywheel off. That way, hopefully I can just slide this thing back and have the sump, the front of the pan, clear the sump. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all these 10mm bolts out that go all the way around the pan in the front. That's a pretty shallow pan, so I'm going to try to snake that out without having to lower this cross member or raise the engine. First, don't forget to drain the oil and take the filter off. Otherwise, you're going to have one hell of a mess. By the way, this place is a mess. It never looks like this. As you can see, I've been pretty busy. My garage never looks like this. I just haven't had time to clean it. Whoa. And he won't clean it. Jeez. Look at this stuff piled everywhere, even on the floor. Okay, so I got all the bolts out from around the pan, and it did not slide out, of course. So I'm going to show you what we're going to do. 18mm nut right there, motor mount bolt. Nut and bolt are the same on both sides. Right there. Slide those bolts out, and then we're going to go to the top side of the car. I'm going to let it down and show you what we're going to do. Okay, so here it is. This is what I did. I took the motor mount bolt nuts off and left the bolts in because they're supporting the engine. I took my Harbor Freight engine brace that I've used a few times already, and this thing actually works pretty well, especially for the price. I mean, you can't beat some of the prices at Harbor Freight, especially for the do-it-yourselfer. So this thing definitely came in handy a few times. So what I did was I set this up somewhere strong on the strut towers, and I took the spark plug wires off. It's going to be hard to see, but I snaked the chain around the second from last exhaust header, the exhaust tube header, on each side. It's hard to see. It's there, trust me. And I wanted to grab it as far back as possible because I don't have a transmission supporting the back of the engine, so I don't want the engine to drop backwards and break something or get jammed. And what I did to get those chains in, I have my little hook tool right here, and it helped me fish the chains through the exhaust manifold tubes. It wasn't easy, especially on this side. I had to take the air tube off, which is right here. Take that off the manifold so I can get my hand in there. And essentially what we're going to do is turn those big screws and lift the engine up. Hopefully that gives me enough clearance to snake the oil pan out down at the bottom. You're going to want to take some pressure off the engine and slide those motor mount bolts out. Okay, so I got the oil pan out, and let me show you what I went through to get it out. It kind of sucked, but I had to take the alternator off to get the motor mount bolt out, to slide it out. So I had to take the belts off, which the 15mm bolt for the tensioner on the top right side of the motor. And I also took the belt off the AC compressor. There's two 15mm bolts that hold the alternator on, right there and there. And then there's a 13mm bolt at the back side that I got from over here. You can see it right there on the back of the alternator. And I was able to slide that bolt out. I didn't take the alternator all the way out because I had the wires on the back of it still. So all I had to do was bend these power steering lines just slightly out of the way, and I was able to move the alternator to the side to slide that motor mount bolt out. But on this side, it wasn't so easy because the AC compressor end bracket was in the way, which looked like a pretty big job to get that out of the way. So I just took the bolts off where the motor mount bolts to the cross member itself. So then I went up top and turned the screws on the my engine brace all the way until the engine was up against the firewall, and that still wasn't enough. I had to put a pole jack underneath the balancer to get the front up, just to get the sump right here to clear the baffle and the pan, which it just barely cleared right there. So I did notice that, yeah, this sump is not as clean as I was hoping it to be, especially seeing how this is my baby for now. I didn't really want to see that. And oh, let me grab the flashlight. What else I saw? Was, look at all that in there, clogging the screen. So I'm gonna clean that out. But I didn't have any issues with the car. It ran good, so it can only run better with that cleaned out. Aside from that, I mean, other than that, it is kind of clean. I've seen cleaner, but well, it's mine now, and the oil will always be changed. So the other thing, that I noticed was that wrong gasket. So that's gonna hold me up for a minute. Okay, so while I was waiting for my oil pan gasket to get here, I cleaned out the sump a little bit. And I also cleaned out the pickup real good. Look how much nicer that looks. You can see the screen now. That'll take oil much better. So what I did to clean that out was I used this pipe cleaner that I cut down and bent, and used gum out and a pick to scrape that stuff loose. Sprayed the gum out in there, repeated the process a bunch of times, and used some compressed air to blow it either out, or the rest of it that's all broken up, blow it up through the tube and let the filter take care of it. Make sure you use safety glasses when you're using this stuff, because it will melt your eyeballs. Okay, so I got my correct oil pan gasket, and these are nice because they're metal infused with rubber, and you don't need to use much silicone. They're really nice, especially when you got to shuffle that pan up in there. You don't get messy with silicone. The only place you do have to use silicone is on the front and back where the timing cover meets the block. Right there. And on this side, sorry about the light. Yeah, right there. And then on the back where the rear main seal cover is, right here and here, just to assure that you don't get a leak. Okay, the torque spec on these 8mm bolts is 18 foot-pounds, and these two rear bolts that go into the rear cover are 106 inch-pounds. Be sure not to use any abrasives when cleaning these surfaces. There's not really any gasket material that is going to be stubborn to get off because of the style of gasket. So you can just use a razor blade for any stubborn spots, and then some brake clean or gum out on a rag, and they clean right up. Okay, when you're tightening these oil pan bolts, there is a sequence for it, but it's usually a pretty general sequence. You want to start from the center and go across, and then work your way out to the front and the back, and that's pretty much goes for any sequence where there's bolts in a big pattern. So I'm just going to install my gasket and repeat the process to install.